Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome back. Hopefully, if you had a lunch break, you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you're staying dry out there. We had some good thunder in the last session. Maybe we'll enjoy that here today at the 1 o'clock. So we've got a great group here on stage for you. Need to get the... There we go. Our ad agencies and ad tech talking about the current state of affairs in the performance marketing world, led by John Rinaldo, General Manager at Dish Media. John's been on stage with us multiple times before, so thanks for being here again. We, as always, like to thank our sponsors, and we like to thank our education sponsor, Blue Water. It's the third straight show that Blue Water has sponsored education, and they've got a quick message for you.
I'm incredibly proud to be the official protein bar of NASCAR.
Are you looking for an on-the-go travel
snack? I feel like yourself. Life even works.
Get yours today.
It really works.
It's better on a Blackstone.
So thank you again to Blue Water for their support of PDMI East. Agencies AdTech assess the marketplace. This was a heavily workshop title, obviously. Very straightforward. And we've got a great group. They're going to introduce yourselves. Take it away, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Thomas. The panel following lunch. So we've got to be extra engaging and, all right, guys? All right. No, we look to put together a fun, engaging, interactive session this afternoon. Thomas mentioned it's agency and ad tech assess the marketplace. We've got industry veterans here up on stage covering the agency side, full funnel platform. We've got a DSP, and we've got someone that focuses on the creative side. So we've got a very well-rounded group of industry vets. I'm John Rinaldo. I'm the general manager at Dish Media. We're the data sales, media sales side of EchoStar. So Dish Network, Sling TV. We recently acquired Boost Mobile. We sell the media for all those properties. We help put advertisers in front of our subscribers, about 30 million of them a month. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about our panelists. We've got some intros. After intros, we'll go into the panel. We look to cover today some performance market trends, things like AI, programmatic, the transition towards digital and impression-based in the performance marketplace. We'll cover some data, segmentation, how it's being used effectively in the market. We'll cover measurement and attribution. How are we gauging success? What are some opportunities for creative optimizations? And the like, and then some challenges, things like fraud and the pain points that we're facing as the industry is evolving. So with that, we've got an esteemed group of panelists here. I'll introduce you all. So we've got Shelby Nichols, who's the VP of Media at Media Culture. She's a 20-year agency veteran. She's been putting omni-channel plans together, including programmatic and CTV since 2009. Media Culture is using their Abacus analytics platform to ensure the data tells the whole story, connecting advertisers with outcomes and not focusing on vanity metrics. Fun fact about Shelby, she likes to knit, and she's good with spreadsheets. So she took those two things, put them together, and she actually built, using spreadsheets, the schematics for knitting patterns that are used globally. All I ask, if I do a halfway decent job, sweater, yeah. I like mittens.
Socks.
Yeah, all right. We've got a deal. We've got Daniel Gulick from JamLoop. He's the head of product. Daniel specializes in performance media with a focus on customer acquisition and attribution methodologies. He's led cross-functional teams, designing and implementing cutting-edge tools to elevate advertising strategies. Daniel's the proud father of 2 girls, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And what's your 1-year-old's name?
Her name's Riley.
Riley is turning 1 on Friday. So let's give her her first round of applause for her first birthday. Next up, we've got Matt Wasserlauf, who's the CEO of Blockboard. Blockboard is a Web3 performance platform combining the blockchain with the power of AI. All of the buzzwords in the media today.
In one fell swoop. Yes.
One fell swoop. Blockboard's driving world-class outcomes for marketers across the digital advertising ecosystem. Fun fact about Matt, He is, for all the millennials out there, besties, BFFs with CC Sabathia, who is a recently inducted Hall of Famer. And Matt sits on the board of CC's Pitch In Foundation, which is with 2 big C's for CC. Very creative.
Well
They
done.
did that. And last but not least, we've got...
Fun facts. I hate them.
You hate him?
I hate my fun facts.
Oh, I love you. That's why I've saved you for last. John Friedman, sitting at the end there. He is the SVP of Client Partnerships at XR. John is charged with leading XR's DR and general market agency strategy and sales efforts. He's been helping brands connect with their customers for more than 3 decades on the agency, data, and media sales side.
Could have done without that too.
You gave it to me, John. Now I'm going to use it. I'm just using what you gave me. John has a passion for disruption and for finding mutually beneficial partnerships with his clients. Now, John's fun facts, real quick, and then we'll get into this panel. Everyone in the audience, picture yourselves. You're 24 years old. You just graduated from University of Indiana, was it? And you're sitting across from Regis Philbin, live TV. You've got a big question on the line. A lot of money's on the line, $1 million. The question is, where does Paddington Bear come from originally? Anyone have the answer?
England.
If you have the answer, call it out.
England?
Matt? England, we've got an England. Anyone else? Oh, come on, Mary. She knew the answer.
Oh, really?
Well, if you got that answer right, like John's cousin did, you would have won $1 million and been the youngest winner of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire
Oh, wow.
with Regis Philbin.
That's cool.
Pretty good fun
He had
fact.
all 3 of his lifelines.
Yeah.
So he cut you could cut it into 2, right? So he polled the audience. He cut it into 2 choices. He polled the audience, and then he called his friend.
Who was a PhD in a room of PhDs. I watched it.
You watched it.
I watched it. It
Yeah.
was a really interesting one. If you want to watch it, just YouTube Paddington Bear, Regis Philbin. It'll pop right up. Last one, true or false? John's dad created Winnie the Pooh. Yell it out. True or false? True. We got a true. We got some falses. It is false. However, John's... Let me get this right. John's dad's roommate's dad created Winnie the Pooh. So John's got a lot of high-level connections, all tied to bears somehow. I don't know. All right.
1 degree of separation from greatness.
1 degree, that's all. All right, so our panel today, we're going to be talking about, we'll be assessing the marketplace specific to agencies and the AdTech market. So we'll pass it over to the panelists. We can run down the line. What's the most important topic in performance media marketing right now, and what might it look like in 6 months or a year?
Goodness, I think one of the most important, really attribution and measurement are key in the performance marketplace right now, and we can dig in more really about the difference between the two, understanding platform attribution and the benefits of that, but also looking at the full picture and understanding and using the tools from a measurement perspective, whether that's incrementality or looking at MMM or an MTA. But I think looking at between privacy regulations and fragmentation, understanding how to use data appropriately to assess business outcomes.
Outcomes and attribution. Daniel?
Cool. Yeah, totally agree with that. I'm a little biased. I come from the performance and measurement side, so attribution's always top of mind for me. I think one of the things we're seeing a lot of is AI, of course, not to lean on the buzzwords, but specifically for kind of reducing the barrier to entry. If you're a small, local, regional business, maybe you've never thought about doing TV because of the cost of production or the complexity. I think that's something that we're seeing AI help reduce some of that, being able to put in some assets from your social media or from your website to generate an ad. That's somebody that's never advertised on TV before. That's an option for them. I think even larger performance brands might have existing creative assets and being able to plug those in for different versioning. So that goes back to the attribution and testing. So maybe you produce 1, 2, 3 high-level spots and then getting AI to cut that down to 6 or 7 different versions and testing those. So yeah, that would be mine.
Is there-
Yeah, and I agree with both, but so I'll speak from my position. Waste. Waste is what I'm focused on in Blockboard. Because currently, the supply chain in digital advertising is toxic. All you have to do is look at what the Department of Justice is doing, going after the verification companies or the class action lawsuit against Trade Desk. There is just a lot of issues resident in the current supply chain. So until we clean that up, performance will suffer. Those clients that are looking for a direct line to their consumer right now have way too many hurdles in front of them. So that's something we're focused on, we're solving, but I would say waste after attribution and AI.
I agree with all of that. I think today it's probably tariffs, but I think after we get through this like quick, sort of speed bump, it's probably fragmentation. So I started at XR about 7 months ago, and I started learning about the DR space about 7 months ago. And I've been fascinated to watch how this business is evolving with the proliferation of destinations and with the technologies and the data and the targeting strategies. So I think maybe the biggest challenge right now is also the biggest opportunity, which is how we navigate that as an industry.
We've got attribution, fraud, and then the fragmentation piece, and they're all probably interrelated in a lot of ways, right? Especially the fraud piece and the fragmentation. A lot of ways to address fragmentation is in places that may have higher levels of fraud at times. How do we, speaking of AI, what do we think AI's impact on performance media is going to be?
It's going to be amazing, and it already is. We're seeing incredible results. Knock-around sunglasses up 375%, proactive skincare up 214%. So we're seeing the early effects of AI, but we also have to take care of that current supply chain. We have to make sure that it's working on a foundation of effectiveness, because right now the current state is a mess.
I would say when it comes to AI, I mean, especially from a digital perspective, it's always been a big piece of that space. So whether it's been, from an optimization, automating some optimizations or understanding which bids to bid on, but I think it also comes with a very balanced approach, because especially if you look at platforms like Google that are leaning into a PMax, well, that's complete AI optimization relying on that. We lose transparency, we lose the ability to pull the optimization levers that we need to as traders. So I think it's making sure that you have that balanced approach, you have the hands-on keyboard, you're generating the friction that is necessary from a trading perspective to analyze the data that you're seeing and not just turning it over into all of the AI optimizations. So it's balancing the technology that's evolving and you have access to, but ensuring that there's that human touch to understand what should I do with all of this data that's there? How do I effectively analyze it and make sure that we're using the most of it? So we're always A/B testing against, once we have new tools in the toolbox, we want to A/B test and understand which pieces of that should we use and not just turn it all over into AI, because we see we'll have better results once we have our team actually analyzing what the data is.
Just back out a little bit. So we've spoken to some specific use cases for AI, but for those in the audience maybe who have not leveraged AI in their businesses, what are, in your opinions and viewpoints, some of the use cases for AI specific to performance marketing?
Yes, we're using it right now to find audiences in real time based on their behaviors. So we scrape the entire open internet, roughly 4 petabytes of information, and we know if you're looking for a pair of sunglasses. And we capture those people and those behaviors, and then we target them in real time. All of that is done through generative AI, Gen AI.
Mm-hmm. On the creative side, maybe, John?
Yeah, we're using AI more to sort of understand creative. So we call it creative intelligence. And the technology has given us the ability to literally score ads for how representative your ad is to the consumer base that you're trying to reach. And so it helps advertisers understand if they're reflecting the skin color, the body type, these kind of things that are in the ad, so that you can sort of pinpoint, hey, when we do this more, we have better performance.
Anything in your world, Daniel?
Yeah, outside of the creative production and generation, obviously that's low-hanging fruit, like I mentioned earlier. From the analysis standpoint, it's really interesting. I think it's super important to deploy AI, especially these LLM-type models, large language models, to do analysis. We've done it in our own reporting, which is nice, but you kind of have to curate it and be careful with it. I think that's kind of what you're touching on. It reminds me, I got an email from a coworker a few weeks ago. It was like, I can tell AI wrote this, and it's like, why would I take the time to read something that you didn't bother to take the time to write, And so like, there's that kind of frustrating, if you just let it go and do its thing, I can kind of catch it in a trap. So one of the things that it'll say about our reporting, hey, this publisher did really well. It's got a 90-something% video completion rate. Well, we know in CTV, everything has a 90, so what is the context there? So, and of course, good prompting will help with this. It's not to downplay AI and to say, well, I'm a better analyst. But it has to go to different levels, second and third. Why is creative B better than creative C? Is it potentially that creative B is running on a different batch of publishers? Maybe those publishers are better. And so I think you have to be careful when you guide AI specifically, rather than just leaning on it and expecting it to do your homework and to do all your optimization.
And write your emails.
And write your own emails. So this is coming from somebody that uses AI and ChatGPT a lot. So I'm definitely not bashing it, but lean on it. Don't let it do your homework.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that there's, we're using AI today to do some of the work, but then we're using people to analyze the results of those inquiries to then use that data. Is there any control that? Any concern that control is lost at some point, that we're able to leverage all the tools and the technology and not lose control of our businesses, really, and just leave it up to the robots?
That's why we couple blockchain with AI. The blockchain acts as the security, or what I call the guardrails, to make sure that when we are distributing that commercial, it's going to the right people. So we see that as a critical element to making sure that AI behaves, but that is something that I feel a high sense of urgency. The time is right now to bring our human values to this machine learning capability so that things do not go amok, do not go awry.
And I would also, just to piggyback off of when you're talking about using AI for modeling and targeting, it's also important to understand the inputs. So it's not, and what are you modeling off of? So, and especially between the signal loss, which I think is a huge issue with CTV right now, but really leaning into first-party data and thinking about how do we get the most out of this? How are we modeling off of the highest quality data set and not just pulling behaviors, especially trying to model off of third-party data and say, okay, I want someone in the market for sunglasses, model off of that. How about bring in your previous purchasers, or understand that setting it as the foundation and then building upon it.
Yeah, so let's talk about data and some of its use cases today in the performance marketplace, right? Data's been used in mass media for years now, addressable in things, and it wasn't adopted, I would say, from our experience, as thoroughly as some of the general market sides of the business early on, but it seems to be today. Where are we today with the data use case on the targeting side specifically? Then we'll get into attribution.
Yeah, from our perspective, I mean, we're seeing more and more of it. Companies want to use their CRM data, plug that in, and target off of that. And there's different variations. It could be retargeting. You could be suppressing campaigns or suppressing audiences if it's customer. So, or you even have some players that are doing lookalike audiences. So plugging in those audiences to do 3 different use cases: retargeting, suppression, or lookalike. I think a customer, a brand, is a lot more comfortable relying on their own data rather than some marketplace that, sure, they're a big name and maybe they're getting it from so-and-so. I just think there's a higher degree of comfort when a brand is able to use their own data to activate off of.
And just to jump on that, because I completely agree, I don't see Trade Desk and Google here at this conference. They're not sharing the customer data back to their customers. And that is critical for their customers to build their business. So we have to be, as an industry, a little bit more mindful now as we create more data sets, second party, retargeting pools, to be sharing that with the customers that are paying for that. So that's I hope a big go forward for us as a group, as a community and an industry, is we need to get out of these big black boxes that are controlling this critical data and really help to grow the business for everybody.
How about you, Shelby, for your clients? You mentioned first party and getting as close to the customer as possible. How close are you getting, and how close is close enough while still maintaining scale?
So I would say it's really a two-pronged approach. So on the beginning, before you launch any campaign or any strategy, it's making sure that your pixel structure is set up so that you can have your audience segmentation appropriately, understand what those visitors look like to different portions of your website for modeling or for retargeting, but also assessing all of the first-party data that you have. So it could be, as you mentioned, a suppression list to ensure that your prospecting campaign is, it has as much reach as possible, but also where can we, are there upgrade strategies? Are there re-engagement strategies for, a lapsed campaign that can work really well, especially over in the nonprofit space? So I think it's assessing all of the data that you have, whether it's from a pixel or, from your CRM, and really getting creative with how you can deploy them and how you can even, use them together to maximize your campaign strategy.
And then speaking of lookalike, right? So we've got we're finding out who our customers are. John, you all are kind of finding ways to tailor creatives to specific viewers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we're building out our dynamic creative optimization suite now, so that, and I think this goes hand in hand, obviously, with AI, so that you can build, customized creative spots to reach different profiles at scale. And I think where XR sort of plays in enhancing value is by enabling data sets of where the completion rates are highest, and by seeing where these spots are landing, the destinations, if you will, both on linear and across the digital ecosystem. Now you have the opportunity to sort of match that up against your own performance data sets and your own targeting sets, so that you could further optimize.
And if I may, just to piggyback on that, I think DCO is so important, especially from a testing perspective. And I think, and CTV is inherently a sandbox for creative testing to understand what is driving the best performance with different audiences. And as you mentioned, it's also looking at video holistically between linear and CTV, is also looking at sequential messaging opportunities. So, do you have clients that are leaning into 60s over on the linear space, and then how do we retarget them knowing that they've had that exposure with a 30 to bring them down, and really using all of the creative tools that you all have, and different ways to control that customer journey, understand what the original touch points have been, and ensure that you're messaging appropriately to them.
We've all mentioned testing to some extent. What does testing look like in the real world with your clients? How are they testing these data sets and judging whether they're performing or not?
For us, it's very different. I think it depends a lot on how mature the advertiser is. Somebody that's doing full MMM and incrementality studies, that's probably a more mature advertiser that has a lot of irons in the marketing fire. You might have somebody that's relatively new to advertising and marketing, and maybe they're doing 1 or 2 channels, and I don't think their testing strategy has to be as complex. It might just be simple, deterministic attribution. Hey, we're going to go 2 weeks on here, 2 weeks off. We might try creative versioning. Our company certainly works with a lot of advertisers that run that gamut. The one thing I will say that's interesting is like AI and being more accessible to activation. I think we're seeing, or from our view, advertisers have a closer access, more access to some of these incrementality type companies that specialize in it. There's a lot of companies out there that are doing really good stuff. Same thing on the MMM side. 10 years ago, there was one big company that did MMM, and it would cost you $150,000 to do, and incrementality, it might be, I don't know if there's any specific companies specializing it, and so I think that's good to see across the industry that those types of specialty businesses are more accessible to advertisers that want to upskill their approach.
Yeah, and I think one of the byproducts of this transition to a more to a digital ecosystem is that now you can test and learn quicker. And so the way I always understood, DR was you'd put a campaign on the air, you'd wait for the phone to ring. And now, because technology and DCO, hopefully the more advanced it gets, you can change this in a matter of minutes. You can change it in a matter of hours. And so that's an incredible opportunity, and that will inevitably lead to more efficient and more effective campaigns. By the same time, it's also going to require a lot of advancements in tech stacks and in ID reconciliation and household graphs and capabilities that from where I sit, and please if I'm wrong, I'd love to learn more about it, but there's a lot of resources that need to be dedicated to that. And so how that becomes democratized is going to be really interesting. What these smaller companies have to contend with now in order to take advantage of these efficiencies is a lot. It's a lot. And that's probably what I would say to what are the future challenges is how you advance your tech stack and your capabilities.
Yeah, so you mentioned ID resolution and a lot of these things that are used in the digital marketplace that wasn't used in TV or audio in the past, in the radio days. So Shelby, how are you all selling through as an agency to clients the value in dedicating these types of resources towards testing these new marketplaces?
Absolutely. So it's been interesting as you're growing your channel mix, and especially from like an incremental reach perspective and testing into different channels. But I think it can be, and you had mentioned, with an MMM and other and incrementality studies, those have become critical to our clients to understand. Not only as we were talking about, attribution and measurement are two very different things. So understanding platform level attribution is critical, but then understanding what is the incrementality of these channels, are all of these channels driving overall business impact, and that's really through an MMM and pulling back and understanding what is the role of all of these channels and how do we test and learn. But I would say even more than having something like an MMM in place would be understanding that it's not just to understand what worked and looking at it from a reporting perspective, but it has to be fueled and used to learn and to continue to evolve the media mix to look ahead. You have to use what we're learning and what we're understanding to form what the strategy will look like moving forward.
With measurement, there's disparity. Matt, you mentioned it before in terms of what data is passed back, what exists in kind of the data pass. So with measurement specifically, how are we working around some of that to show our advertisers what's working and what's not?
Yeah, I find that our industry has gotten too cute for its own good. We have so many different tech partners and vendors that are in the middle of this. It gets very, very hard to draw that direct line of attribution, especially when you introduce media mix modeling. And I remind my clients every single day, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And if we try to and hold for that day of perfection, it ain't never going to come, and you're going to miss your opportunity. Because you may see the ad on the billboard outside as you're driving your car into work, and then you'll be exposed to an ad on the TV and you'll buy, was it the billboard, was it the TV, who knows? Okay, so we do our best. You pick your chosen provider, you do your analysis, but what I ask our customers to do is look at the big picture, where you see impact, where you see lift, where you see some difference. We have a great client in California, Rev Air. They make hair dryers. And when they turned us on, they saw a huge swell in sales. They had their biggest Black Friday. And they have other media that they run, and they know they have some success here, some success there. But you can't look for that perfect solve because it's never going to come. You have to make gut choices, what you think is working, where you see big impact, where you don't, and work from there. But I just ask and beg the audience, don't expect perfection. It's not going to come.
Multi-touch attribution, kind of, spoken about a bit. What does that look like today? Like with your customers, how accurate do we feel we're able to be with what drove to the actual sale?
So I would say from an MMM perspective and kind of going back to AI, that's where the models are getting better and getting smarter. But if you look at, at its core, the measurement techniques have not changed that much over the years. But what is changing is the amount of data that we can feed into these models and how we can measure that and how we can analyze that for better outcomes. So I think that, at its core, we are evolving, but being able to use new models and being able to feed larger data sets into them is what's really making them more actionable, more effective, and where we can update them faster and more in real time.
What are advertisers getting in the programmatic or specific with JamLoop? What are you all providing in terms of attribution?
Yeah, so kind of twofold, and it's on the MTA. Our MTA is only within our universe, right? We're not privy to what our advertisers are doing on Facebook or other digital channels, if they are, certainly other outdoor channels. I imagine an agency's probably getting more data than we're getting. We're a platform that just buying the CTV, maybe some adjacent and some channels there. So it's MTA in our universe, and sometimes that's helpful and good enough to see that, hey, we showed this person 3 ads and then they converted, and here's all of the 3 ads, and we can even weight that, and that's all fine. But sometimes that advertiser wants to plug in that data to their own MTA. And so what that looks like for us is, let's say somebody sees 3 ads, 2 ads, 1 ads, whatever it is, and then they go to purchase. Sure, we have a nice dashboard, that's great, and they can use that. They can also export that information and see that path to conversion. They're typically passing us, let's say it's an e-com, they're typically passing us the revenue of that purchase, the order ID of that purchase, and then that's something that they're plugging into their CRM. And they might find things like, JamLoop attributed this person, but we also saw this person click on a Facebook banner. And then we saw them click on a branded search ad. And so I think what our customers are telling us is we see the connectivity between all of these channels. And so, we have to be very specific when we're talking about MTA. That's our methodology for just our universe. But sometimes a brand wants to take in all of that data to do a full-fledged MTA to see how our impressions are overlapping or not overlapping with investing in.
You're passing the data back to your advertisers so that they can analyze it and make sense of the whole picture.
Yeah, I think that's our philosophy. Nobody's going to be a better analyst of your brand and your performance than you are. We're a platform, a buy-side facing platform, and we want to give you everything that you could possibly need. And I think others are too. I think a lot of companies like ours in the space similar. passing that data back to the customer because they'll know how to.
I was just going to say, so XR's legacy is linear delivery, just getting the spot, to the networks. But the company's passion is creative control. It's understanding this piece of creative and where it's going and how it's resonating. And I think that's a key value proposition as it just gets more complex. And so we can take Matt's data and we can we can see what's happening on your platform and on these other publishers and these other platforms, and we can just provide a singular view. And then if we enable it so that you can rub it up against your own first-party data sets and you can rub it up against your conversion metrics, then you can start to see sort of this MTA across a number of different platforms. And it's done by applying a singular creative ID. When that single piece of creative goes to publisher A or platform B or where have you, it sort of takes on a life of its own. And the idea, the passion of our company is that we sort of give you a way to unify that.
And then Matt, you all are using the blockchain to do a lot of this, which is an interesting use case for blockchain. You want to talk a little bit about how you're putting that together?
I've been doing online video advertising as long as there's been online video advertising, and in addition to seeing a market grow to what's today roughly $50 billion, I saw the bad stuff. I saw the bots and the made-for-advertising sites and the waste grow with it. I was waiting for the verification companies to come in and help this big problem, and all they've done is build their businesses on top of the big problem. So now we saw a solve with the blockchain. Blockchain is at its core a public ledger. Most people don't know that. They think of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but really it's a new technology platform or operating system, if you will, that allows everything to be transparent. So we are now showing complete transparency across the entire digital advertising ecosystem, from ad server to attribution. You know exactly where your ads are running, and we use Ethereum blockchain to do that. So we use what's called a smart contract. It's a digital insertion order, if you will. A piece of code that sits lightly on Ethereum, pre-verifies all the ad calls from all these amazing publishers that are booming right now, like Peacock and Paramount Plus and Hulu. We pre-verify that it's a real person at the other end of your ad that's seeing your ad. We log it on this public ledger called the blockchain, and we deliver the outcomes. So all of this is done on the blockchain, and we see this as a real game changer in digital advertising, because the amount of bad stuff has grown into what Pepsi, Zach Lane, said 2 weeks ago. There's $120 billion of ad fraud. It's enormous, and it's only going to get worse with AI. So we're trying to take measures now by using this new technology called the blockchain to fix that. And we're excited about all the tests that we're doing with clients like yourselves who are seeing those great outcomes at the end of this. So that's in essence how we use the blockchain.
The fraud, you got to ask my team, I talk about it all the time. How big of a concern is fraud for your clients? Shelby, maybe we'll start with you.
I would say fraud has always been an issue from a programmatic perspective. But if you're using premium DSPs like these platforms and others, there are a lot of measures that are in place. I would say fraud is a concern, and we put every measure in place to mitigate it. But if you're going directly to the supply with a first-party PMP, you know exactly where it's coming from. I completely take your point. The supply can get really messy, but if you're going directly to the supply, if you have your reliable data, I would say a bigger issue perhaps than fraud is signal loss. So whether it's the Ask app not to track, and when the iOS update several years ago that is putting more pressure on the on the household device graphs and understanding, especially from a CTV perspective, what was that exposure? What is the ultimate action to get back to business impact? So it's there, and it always has been. I think it's just a matter of putting as many measures in place as possible. But I think there are some other issues out there that really tie back to attribution and business impact that we're more concerned about.
You mentioned fraud's a concern and programmatic for you. So Daniel, working at a DSP, how much of a concern is it for you all, and kind of how are you preventing it with your customers?
Yeah, for sure, and it should be a concern. I mean, as Matt touched on, it's rampant, it's out there, and it's great to hear that there's technologies like that mitigate that. For us, it's a slightly different approach. All of our buys is direct to publisher, so that's really important for us. It focuses on premium. We're not operating in the open exchange, but I think there's different methods to avoid it. It is kind of interesting that some of the companies that are built to detect it and mitigate it, it's like, what is the incentive there? Not to bash those guys, but if there is no fraud, then I guess they go out of business, right? They've cleaned up the mess. That's an interesting dynamic. But yeah, I do think it's important. I agree with Shelby. The signal loss, I think, is also as large as a threat and a concern to some of our customers, and I think that's why we're seeing such an adoption of probabilistic type attribution, not relying on these address or matching to a device ID, just because those things can be a lot of noise. It can be false positive attribution, and it's really important to a company. Not to say that deterministic stuff is no good. I think it's useful, right? All modeling is wrong. Some modeling is useful, is the old saying. And so it's good to test that deterministic with probabilistic, because fraud, the signal loss is also a threat.
So for those in the audience who aren't that up to speed on where the concerns are with fraud, Matt, I know this is something you dive into a lot. MFA, bots, domain spoofing, a quick 1 minute overview of where the concern is, how it works, what they're doing today.
I don't have all those methods down committed to memory. I just know there are a lot of them, and most importantly, I know the bad actors are far outpacing the good actors. And it's only getting worse in this new age of AI. Signal loss is an excellent example. They're figuring out how to game the system. Whether it's using these devices like Samsung or LG and figuring out how to spin impressions, in dark corners of these new devices. They're outsmarting, and why? Because the CPMs in digital streaming advertising are very rich. So they're chasing the money. So we have to be as fast. We have to keep pace and get ahead of the bad actors. And there are many, many names, domain spoofing. I mean, it's unbelievable. But they're coming up with new ones as we speak. So that's the game. That's what we have to try to do collectively as an industry.
They're one step ahead. Last point on this. So you mentioned, maintaining direct relationships with publishers is the key to avoid fraud. Something we talk about a lot in my role. When you're working directly with a high-quality publisher, there is no fraud, right? So how are you all, with the fragmentation and the hundreds potentially publishers out there, how are you doing that and maintaining that many relationships, and just managing that?
That has been a really important, and to your point, when it comes to supply side optimization, it has gotten crazy, out of control, and a bit bloated. So for us, it has been critical that we maintain our relationships with direct publishers, and it also helps from an inventory perspective to have that open dialogue. And you're working directly with all of your reps, and you're assessing what portion of the deal is working, what isn't working, and how do we, can we negotiate on price? How do we couple this with what we're doing over on the linear space? Because it is a holistic approach. So for us, making that pivot from relying on the open market or any sort of always-on third-party deals that may sit at the DSP level, being able to go and focus on first party and find the inventory that matters the most to all of our clients has been absolutely critical, and that's a primary focus for us.
So we've got a few more minutes up here. We will have 5 minutes, ideally at the end of this, to ask some questions of the panelists. So if you have any questions or you want to think of some, you've got a few minutes still. Let's kick it over to John. So relating to all of this, how is XR using some of the things you're doing in creative, addressing some of these concerns, or are they?
I mean, our role is we're agnostic, and so we have a pretty robust connectivity team to make sure that we have all the specs to make sure that the ads appear the right way, to transcode the way that they needed. And I think our role is really just to provide that data and to be transparent. When you use a third party partner, that's one of the benefits. I will just, this is out of scope, but somebody said, they're following the money, and brands and agencies hold the money, and so the more demands that the demand side puts on their partners to ensure transparency and protection, I think will probably have the greatest impact on change, and sort of mitigating the risk. We do a lot of risk mitigation. It's more on like the talent side, the right side, but in terms of like fraud, we just provide the data to help.
So traditionally, TV was a fairly prohibitive medium, right? It was expensive to get involved. A lot of companies are out there trying to solve for that. Removing some of the barriers. What are they? What were they in TV, and how are we removing some of them today?
Yeah, we talked about creative. It's interesting. Platforms like Meta and Google have kind of opened the eyes of TV people. Like, hey, my story last week, my father-in-law owns a small golf cart store in Central Florida, and he's spent $500 in paper search, and he's spent $1,000. And this guy is a golf cart guy, definitely not a digital. And so, that's probably somebody that wouldn't historically come to TV. Oh, you need an agency, you need to produce a big spot, it's too complicated, I can't do that. And at least for us, I think our eyes are open to, other DSPs, other TV platforms are more on the same team, not on the opposite team. And it's really those big, giant digital platforms, social platforms that are the competitors. And whether it's creative or I need to have an agency. Hopefully they eventually get an agency because their marketing is so effective. I think, just that assumption that it's too complicated and I need to really know TV in order to buy it. I think we're seeing that, whether it's self-serve platforms or managed service companies out there, really help out those small, medium-sized businesses.
John, you want to talk a little bit about the creative side and how folks are, getting creatives made for TV?
Yeah, we're just at the beginning of AI and the creative tools. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and I met 3 separate companies that enable TV quality creative on your phone. And so all your father-in-law needs to do is plug in his company name, and whatever's on his website will be uploaded into a made-for-TV, 30. And then with DCO, you're just going to be able to personalize that for whatever content or whatever, targeting. And of course, I think back to this sort of passion I spoke about, this creative control, the return path data, the data that you get on that so that you can better understand what works and so that you can, optimize and, have greater brand impact and greater, efficiency, workflow efficiency and control will be sort of the next wave.
I got an interesting, different tact on this, but we work with a number of auto dealers. And, the auto dealers, if you know anything about these folks, they love seeing their commercials on television. Usually they're in them. Usually their entire family is in them. And they have become accustomed over 50, 70 years of seeing themselves on linear television. That has gone all away in streaming. These guys never see their commercials in streaming. And so we started working with a handful of them. Now we're up to like 50 or 80 of them. And they're calling us and saying, oh my God, I just saw my commercial for the first time on streaming. And I cannot begin to tell you how gratifying that is. You know, we're making it much easier. We're giving them accountability. We're giving them transparency. You know, all these local dealers, they have their local teams. They want to see, you know, my Boise State Ford dealer wants to see his spot in the Boise State college football playoff game. And lo and behold, there it is. And he's so happy. And that's something that has not been, or we've been lacking in our industry. And it's time to turn the page. You know, if we're going to win these great TV advertisers into our space, we need to give them the same accountability they've become accustomed to over the last 70 years. And that's something I'm really excited about in our future.
Yeah. Shelby, anything on that front, or shall we start with questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just echo what the other guys were saying, especially just in terms of accessibility. So we see the same thing with some of our clients where it may not be a national, there may not be enough GRPs to run an effective national TV buys. So how can we start testing on streaming? And to your point, with all the data that's coming back, it's the perfect testing ground. How can we prove out television, especially if we have clients that have restricted geos or a very niche audience, or how can we use this channel to maximize the efficiency and of their budgets without, and limit the amount of waste. So there's a lot of conversations in that front where linear may not be approachable, but CTV is the right solution at kind of as an entry point to prove out the channel and start building their program.
Awesome. With that, let's open it up for you all. We'll field some questions. We've got about 5 minutes.
I saw Matt's hand about 5 minutes ago. Now you want to go last. All right. All right.
Hey, Long Ellis with Denali TV. I'm just curious, has there been any innovation in linear TV attribution modeling? I mean, obviously, connected is the hot item, but I'm just curious if linear has kind of been forgotten at this point, or there's been some progress in terms of tracking viewership all the way down the funnel to purchase, et cetera.
Yeah, I work with two traditional TV companies, Nexstar and Inspiration Network, and we've told them we are road mapping this. We want to bring the same capabilities we have in digital to linear TV, and for us, it's 2026 business.
Hi, Long.
Go ahead.
It's good to see you again. Yeah.
So just to add to that, so we at Dish, I can actually answer this one. We launched Dish Connected about a year and a half ago, and that is IP, dynamic ad insertion into Dish satellite households. Oh, cool. Right? And some of our counterparts in the cable and satellite world have launched similar products since then. So the same types of IP-based, pixel-based, IP match attribution is available in linear TV households today. So we're able to package that up with our CTV inventory and run across both platforms in one.
I'll just add that, we deliver a ton of linear stuff. So back to that idea before about having a unified creative ID, that's what I think will enable understanding reach and frequency across platforms and, helping to measure attribution and measurement.
And I'll just also add that linear attribution is a huge part of our business and of the Abacus platform. So it's most certainly not forgotten. I think that is also a piece that is continuing to evolve and using different tools and different models to truly understand the impact of linear. And then we're also looking from an incremental reach standpoint, how is all television together driving performance impact. So it's something that is continuing to evolve on our side every day.
Other questions? Oh, all right, one over here.
John, you mentioned earlier that the success of the DR used to be that you would wait to hear the phone ring. And I'm curious now in the methodology of DR, especially with digital media and social media, are there any data about the actual conversion methodology? So if someone were to see maybe a text us or chat us box in a digital or social media ad, and they actually go to either an AI chat bot or to a live chat, and is that conversion rate higher than just driving them to a website or not having any capabilities to actually have a dynamic conversation with them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pun. I don't know if you would know more than I would. I know that you see a lot more QR codes and URLs. We have, conversion pixels to sort of enable an understanding of where they go. But in terms of like the specifics of what experiences getting there,
we have customers that track a chatbot, and it depends on the advertiser. Sometimes it's a little bit more trouble than it's worth. One, from a configuration standpoint, a lot of those chatbots are operated by third-party services, not the hosting domain, not the company that owns the website. And then I think the second thing is you have to ask yourself, is this really an intent-based action? Is this a buying signal? Or is this an existing customer on my website having trouble logging in or something like that? If they want to track it, great, go for it. You can put a pixel on it, that's fine. I would argue that most brands probably have some other type of outcome that they're looking, whether they're an e-com and they're trying to sell something, they're an insurance company, they're looking for you to fill out a form, whether it's an insurance form or whether it's a reverse mortgage qualification, whatever the case may be, there's probably something else on there that's a little bit more buying than a chatbot. I would even say maybe the click to call is probably a little bit more of a, hey, that's interesting signal there. What does that mean? Quantify that. So, yeah, I guess that's my outlook on the chat. But yes, you can pixel it and track it, but most of the times, at least in my experience, there's probably an other action or event on the website that's a little bit more meaningful.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, but I would say it's critical in the pixel setup and structure, because to your point, and every advertiser is different. So, and what the user experience is going to be, but click to call can be, and that's something that we will, when we have the opportunity, or if that's something that's prevalent on a client's website, that we want to track. Unfortunately, you can't follow all of that like you would traditional phone call, where that was the station, that was the spot, and this is the lead or the business outcome that came from that particular phone call. But it is, and especially if we're looking at senior products, can be a really helpful buying signal to understand that's the user behavior, that's how they want to interact. So how can we at least capture that data, help model off of it to find people who are going to have that intent, but just know that we can track all of these different signals to understand what the user engagement is.
We spent a lot more time at Blockboard trying to simplify that path to the sale. So our dealers that I just spoke of, our auto dealers, they have so many widgets on their sites, whether it's service calls, whether it's test drives, whether it's chatbot and what have you, that we're now spending a lot more time trying to streamline that, because they want to sell cars. So we have a concerted effort to try to make sure we're pixeling the right place, that cart or wherever they're buying that product, and try to remove all the rest of the noise so that we can drive the best ROI for our clients.
We have time for one more.
I know he's needed, you know me. I appreciate it. All right. The one thing that hit me that I think is critical for everyone to talk, at least for us to talk about, is, I forget who said it on the panel, someone on the left side, I don't know, but direct has no fraud. Did anyone else hear that? Because for me, that hits home so hard. I've been at Blockboard for 4 years. We only buy direct. We don't go through third-party open exchanges, and I'm not going to name any publishers, they might get mad at me that are here, but like, we've seen 80%, 40%, 30% fraud on direct channels. Wow. So for us, I mean, the word premium DSP gets thrown out there. It's all about the technology. Inventory is pretty much the same with these DSPs at the end of the day. It's how they source it, right? So I look at the word premium DSP as, like you said, the technology that comes along with it. I think premium as in, we go against the trade desk, right? That's one of the bigger ones out there. They've paired with the IASs of the world to add that tech tax to the buy. So we mentioned barriers and whatnot. How do you work with your clients and talk about those barriers and add tech tax in to help make sure that they have the confidence they're not running in front of fraud, even if they're buying direct? Is that a long-winded way to get to that question?
So the question was, you believe there is fraud indirect, and how are you addressing that?
Yes. Understood. And I will say, I mean, there is fraud. I mean, it's impossible to escape all of it. But I would say it's just taking every step we can to get as close to the supply, and it's having those direct conversations with your reps. It's also pulling a whole variety of reports to understand what is the quality of that inventory, how do we identify where there may be, impressions that we need to avoid. And then it's having that continual conversation to refine that inventory. I mean, I will not say that that makes everything fraud-free. I will just say, I mean, you're just mitigating the risks at every point you can. Yes, there are tech taxes which you can control. So trying to figure out, is it IVT, or are we looking at brand safety, and understanding what is the cost for all of this, and where do we need it, which deals do we need it on that may have a broad, access, or, different publishers that are a part of it, versus something that we're, going directly to Paramount for, whatever that might be, that may not need to absorb those additional taxes. So it's always a balance. I mean, that's in the digital space, there are, a number of taxes that are imposed in that, and it's just weighing the benefit versus the cost for different clients. I mean, all of our campaigns are structured differently based on our client goals. So. But I would just say it's important to have those first-party deals, to have those conversations, and not relying on the open exchange where it's just, some remnant inventory that you have to put all of those, additional layers to ensure that everything is running as it should.
Is that a wrap?
We good? All right. How about a round of applause for the group?